Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and appreciate you being here, Madam Secretary. We had an opportunity briefly to see one another last week at an AFN reception where I think it was good to note the progress that has been made with murdered, missing Indigenous women and persons, and recognizing that May 5th was a day to acknowledge some of that progress. So I thank you for that. I also saw you last week at the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. That was probably a much less pleasant time for you. You certainly heard my frustration about the department's continued targeting of resources and resource development, specifically in my home state of Alaska. To kind of share with colleagues, if you're interested, I'm just going to recount one day. And it was not a good day, but it was one day out of many. It was April 19th when the state of Alaska was targeted with three separate releases, three separate declarations out of the administration. The department closed 13 million acres of our petroleum reserve. The department rejected the Ambler Access Project, which is guaranteed by law. And the department issued a major land plan that failed to lift public land orders that was directed by a law that I wrote 20 years ago. For 20 years, we've been trying to advance this. But this day, April 19th, where there were three measures that came out of the administration that just kind of laid Alaska to its knees, these are on top of dozens of others that have effectively worked to limit Alaska's opportunity when it comes to our resources. The term that I have used and others have picked up is that Alaska is being sanctioned by this administration more heavily than they sanction regimes in places like Iran or Venezuela. When President Carter signed ANILCA in 1980, he promised in that 100% of Alaska's offshore and 95% of our onshore would be open to responsible development. And Alaskans accepted that. We accepted that in good faith in exchange for tens of millions of acres that were placed in federal conservation status. And so just as we did in our Statehood Act, we assumed that we would have access to the lands that had been granted that we had selected. And so the irony is not lost on me that President Biden, who voted for ANILCA, is now turning his back on what was a very carefully balanced effort and is part of Alaska's foundational laws. And instead, he's cutting off vast swaths of our state to score points with the environmental community in the name of, quote, protecting 30% of America's lands by 2030, and more immediately, I think, an effort to court voters. But in the meantime, Alaskans are left asking themselves, they're saying, why? What is it? Alaskans do not need to be, Alaska doesn't need to be protected from Alaskans. This is an area that we treasure, we love, it's our home. Alaska Native people, as you well know, Madam Secretary, have been stewards of the land since time immemorial. We recognize the development is not appropriate in all places. And then when we do seek to develop, we don't ask for very much. The coastal plain, the agreement in the law that was passed, the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, agreed to access to 2,000 surface acres. It is 1/10,000th of all of ANWR. 1/10,000th. We describe it by way of a postage stamp. We describe it in ways that people recognize the extraordinarily small footprint. So I look at that and it's like, how's that for balance? Because effectively, you get Alaska that gets one part, and the federal government gets 9,999. That doesn't seem like balance, but that was what we were asking for, not too much. And then where we have developed, our development, our environmental record, I will contend is second to none. And yet somehow, our record, our excellent record, hasn't resulted in the trust that we deserve, but instead an even stronger effort to take more away. And that's a mistake. It's just absolutely a mistake. There is so much that we have to offer in terms of energy, in terms of the minerals that we need to produce the clean energy. But it seems like the administration just does not care. Never mind that shutting down Alaska undermines the administration's own policies. Never mind that this enables authoritarian regimes, human rights abuses, environmental devastation in other nations. It just seems that the administration would rather export environmental injustice abroad than develop our own resources to help our own people. So today, I see a department that ignores the law with regards to Ambler, with regards to our petroleum reserve, with regards to our land management plans, our coastal plain, and the prioritization of conservation above all else. Even when it seems that you have the opportunity to do the right thing, you fail in it. A few months ago, I wrote language right here in this committee that directed you, Madam Secretary, to go back and consult with the Alaska Natives on the North Slope before finalizing the NPRA rule. If the department had done that, if you had actually done that, you would have learned that those who live there, they didn't support that rule. You'd know that they don't want Interior to protect them from the economic development that has done more to increase their life expectancies than anything else has. But you ignored the direction and them and the law and Alaska's congressional delegation and Alaska's state legislature, and you issued a bad rule. And so I asked you last week to give some thought to what justifies this administration's treatment of Alaska. Why are we treated like one big national park and wildlife refuge instead of a state that has balanced the need for development and the desire for conservation? Because that's what we try to do every single day. But when one end of that bargain is lost, the whole thing is lost. It took decades to settle Alaska lands matters, but less than 4 years for this administration to just turn everything on its head. So I hope that you're ready to answer my questions today, because right now I'm in a position, I'm in a place where it's really hard for me to discuss the budget request. All I can think of is if Interior is going to use its funding to make these kinds of decisions that penalize my state in this way, then I feel like what we need to be doing here is looking for ways to cut the department's budget until the department gets the point and returns to following the law and the balance that is reflected within it.